The clock on the mantel ticked steadily, filling the silence of the room with its rhythmic beat. Daniel sat in his armchair, barely illuminated by the faint glow of a single lamp. His eyes were fixed on the darkened doorway, his mind replaying the strange changes in Melissa's behavior over the past few months. The once loving wife had become distant, her affection now feeling rehearsed, her smiles hollow. Business trips that didn't align with her job, whispered phone calls, and a faint scent of cologne that wasn't his. Each incident was a piece of the puzzle. Tonight, Daniel had decided to piece them together. He had told Melissa he'd be working late and faked exhaustion when he came home, retreating to their bedroom early. As soon as he heard her light footsteps fading down the hall, he slipped back downstairs. Now he waited, cloaked in the shadows, his hand gripping a photo that had sealed his suspicions. Melissa and an unfamiliar man in an intimate pose, her radiant smile a cruel mockery of the love they once shared. The creak of the front door jolted him. He stiffened, his pulse quickening as the door slowly inched open. A figure slid inside, tall, confident, and utterly unaware of the storm waiting in the darkness. Daniel's jaw tightened. The game was over. The man who entered moved with practiced ease, as though he had done this before. Trevor, Daniel assumed. The name had appeared on Melissa's phone one too many times, disguised as a harmless co-worker in her rushed explanations. Now, there he was, a flesh-and-blood reality intruding on Daniel's home, his sanctuary. Trevor shut the door quietly, glancing around as if checking for witnesses, then slipped off his shoes and padded across the floor with the confidence of someone who belonged. Daniel stayed perfectly still, his breath controlled, his posture relaxed but poised. He watched as Trevor stepped into the living room, pausing when his eyes caught the dim light of the lamp. For a moment, Trevor hesitated, scanning the room like a predator sensing danger. But Daniel's chosen spot, shrouded in shadow, kept him hidden. Trevor continued forward, oblivious. Every step the man took fueled the fire simmering inside Daniel, but he held it in check. His anger wasn't the kind that burned out of control. It was a cold, calculating fury that demanded patience. He wanted them both to see that he had been 2 steps ahead of their deceit. Trevor set down a small overnight bag near the base of the stairs and pulled out his phone, likely to alert Melissa of his arrival. Daniel's stomach churned as Trevor typed, his fingers quick and confident. Did Melissa wait in their bedroom now, eagerly anticipating her lover's arrival, while her husband waited below like a ghost haunting his own life? The thought was like a dagger to Daniel's heart, but the pain didn't show on his face. Years of business negotiations had taught him how to mask emotion, how to wield calm as a weapon, and tonight he would wield it well. Trevor seemed comfortable now, brushing his fingers through his tousled hair, and wandered over to the small table where a collection of framed family photos sat. Daniel noticed the smug smirk curling Trevor's lips as he picked up one of the frames, a picture of Daniel and Melissa at their anniversary dinner. Trevor turned it slightly as if erasing Daniel's presence in some small symbolic way and set it back down. It was in that moment Daniel chose to reveal himself. "You know," Daniel said, his voice slicing through the silence like a blade, "that's my favorite photo of us. Shame you felt the need to touch it." Trevor froze, his head whipped toward the shadows, his smirk vanishing. "Oh," Daniel leaned forward, allowing the light to touch his face. He rested his elbows on his knees, holding Trevor's startled gaze with a calm intensity. "It's rude to sneak into another man's house without introducing yourself. Why don't we skip the pleasantries? I'm Daniel, Melissa's husband, and you must be Trevor." Trevor opened his mouth, but no words came out. Daniel tilted his head, a cold smile forming. "Speechless already? Don't worry, the night's just getting started." Trevor's phone buzzed. But neither man looked at it. The air between them was electric, a silent challenge. "The room seemed to shrink, Armando, miss." Trevor stood, frozen, his arrogance faltering in the presence of Daniel's steady gaze. For a man who exuded confidence moments ago, he now resembled a deer caught in headlights. The phone in his hand buzzed again, breaking the silence. But neither man acknowledged it. Trevor's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard, his earlier composure cracking. What are you doing here?" Trevor stammered, his voice a far cry from the confident figure Daniel had just observed. Daniel leaned back in his chair, crossing his legs casually, as if they were merely discussing the weather. "That's a funny question, don't you think? I could ask the same of you, but I think we both know the answer." Trevor's eyes darted toward the staircase, panic creeping into his expression. "Look, man, I didn't—" "Didn't what?" Daniel interrupted, his tone sharp but controlled. "Didn't think I'd find out? Didn't think I'd be awake? Or didn't think I'd care?" He stood now, his presence towering over Trevor. Daniel didn't need to raise his voice. The weight of his calm fury did all the talking. Trevor took a step back, bumping into the edge of the couch. "Listen, this isn't what it looks like." Daniel barked a short, humorless laugh. "Spare me the clichés, Trevor. I didn't sit here for hours tonight just to hear bad excuses. I know exactly what it looks like. But I'm curious, what were you hoping it would look like? Did you think you could waltz in here, play house with my wife, and sneak out before morning, or did you think you'd replace me altogether?" The mention of Melissa brought a flicker of defiance back to Trevor's eyes. "Maybe if you paid more attention to her," he said, his tone bitter, "she wouldn't need someone else." Daniel's jaw tightened, but his expression remained calm. "Ah, there it is. The justification. The part where I'm supposed to feel guilty for your actions. Let me guess. You're doing me a favor, right? Keeping her happy while I work myself to death providing this home she so graciously shares with you in secret." Trevor tried to hold his ground, but the cracks in his bravado were widening. He was a man accustomed to manipulation, not confrontation. "I don't owe you an explanation," he muttered, stepping sideways, angling toward the staircase. Daniel stepped forward, cutting him off with deliberate ease. "You don't owe me anything, Trevor, but you do owe yourself a good look in the mirror. You've been playing games with another man's wife, and now you're trying to slither away like the coward you are." Trevor clenched his fists, but Daniel's steady, unyielding demeanor made any show of force seem futile. The buzzing of the phone broke the tension again, and this time Daniel gestured toward it. "Don't you answer. It's probably Melissa. Let's invite her to the party. I think it's time we all had a little heart-to-heart, don't you?" Trevor's face paled, but he stayed silent. Daniel folded his arms, waiting. The showdown was far from over, and he intended to be the one standing tall when it ended. The sound of light footsteps descending the stairs signaled Melissa's approach, and the air grew heavier with anticipation. Daniel remained composed, his arms still folded, as Trevor shifted uncomfortably. The woman at the center of the storm appeared in the doorway, her expression shifting from curiosity to alarm as she took in the scene. "Danielle?" she asked, her voice wavering, her eyes darting between the two men. "What's going on?" Daniel's smile was cold and deliberate. "Good evening, Melissa. I was just getting acquainted with your guest. Why don't you come join us? It seems we have a lot to discuss." Melissa hesitated, her hand gripping the doorframe for support. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, her voice tinged with a mixture of fear and defiance. Trevor finally found his voice, though it was weak. "Melissa, he knows." Her head snapped toward Trevor, her carefully crafted facade beginning to crumble. "Knows what? Don't be ridiculous." Daniel sighed, stepping toward the table where he had placed the photo. "Don't insult my intelligence, Melissa. I've been patient, perhaps too patient, but tonight is where it ends." He held up the incriminating photograph, the image of her and Trevor undeniable in its intimacy. Melissa's face drained of color as she stared at the evidence. "Where did you get that?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "That's your concern?" Daniel replied, his tone dripping with bitter sarcasm. "Not the fact that you've been sneaking around with this man? Not the fact that you've been lying to my face for months?" Melissa's defensive instincts kicked in. "It's not what it looks like," she said quickly, her words overlapping with Trevor's feeble attempt at the same excuse. Daniel raised a hand, silencing them both. "Don't. I've heard enough lies to last a lifetime. This isn't a misunderstanding, Melissa. This is betrayal, pure and simple." Melissa's expression shifted, her fear giving way to desperation. "Daniel, please, we can talk about this. I was confused. I made a mistake, but it doesn't mean I don't love you." Daniel chuckled, a sound devoid of humor. "Love? Is that what you call this? Love doesn't sneak around at night. Love doesn't bring another man into our home, into the life we built together. Don't cheapen the word." Trevor, emboldened by Melissa's attempt at damage control, interjected. "Maybe if you weren't so busy with work, she wouldn't have—" Daniel's icy glare cut him off mid-sentence. "Don't speak for her, Trevor. You're a guest in this mess, not a participant in our marriage. Stay in your lane." Turning back to Melissa, Daniel's voice softened, but it carried a weight that silenced any protests. "You made your choices, Melissa, and now I'm making mine." From behind his chair, he pulled a neatly prepared stack of papers, divorce documents. Melissa's breath hitched as he placed them on the coffee table. "This isn't a negotiation," he said firmly. "Pack your things. Tonight, this chapter of my life ends. Tomorrow, I start fresh." Melissa's tears began to fall, but Daniel didn't waver. He had been broken, but now he was free. The room fell into a heavy silence as Melissa stared at the divorce papers, her tears streaming freely now. Trevor remained frozen, his earlier arrogance long extinguished, his eyes darting toward the door as though seeking an escape. Daniel stood unmoving, his calm exterior masking the whirlwind of emotions churning inside him. This moment, though painful, was necessary. He wasn't here to save a relationship. He was here to reclaim his life. Melissa finally broke the silence, her voice trembling. "Daniel, please, you can't mean this. We've been married for 15 years. We have a life, a history. Don't throw it all away over one mistake." Daniel let out a slow breath, his gaze unwavering. 15 years, Melissa. 15 years of trust, of love, of building something I thought was unshakable. But it wasn't me who threw it away, it was you. One mistake. He shook his head, his voice laced with bitter sarcasm. You don't accidentally sneak a man into your husband's home. That takes planning, deceit, and a complete lack of respect. Melissa opened her mouth to argue but stopped, realizing there was nothing she could say to undo what she'd done. Her eyes darted to Trevor, seeking some form of support, but he was already backing away, hands raised as if surrendering. "Don't look at me," Trevor muttered, his voice low. "This is between you two. I'm done." Daniel smirked coldly. "Done? How convenient. You were brave enough to crawl into another man's house, but now that the spotlight's on you, you're running for the door." He stepped aside, gesturing toward the exit. "Go on, Trevor. Get out. You've overstayed your welcome." Trevor didn't hesitate, grabbing his bag and bolting for the door, his footsteps echoing in the silence that followed. As the door slammed shut behind him, Melissa flinched, her sobs growing louder. "I'm sorry, Daniel," she whispered. "I was lonely, I didn't mean for it to go this far. Daniel's expression softened for a moment, but only briefly. He knelt down to her level, his voice calm yet firm. Lonely? I was right here, Melissa. I worked hard to give us everything, to build a life we could both be proud of. If you were lonely, you could have talked to me. Instead, you chose to betray me. That wasn't loneliness. It was selfishness. He stood again, the weight of his decision solidifying in his mind. I've already contacted a lawyer. These papers are a formality. You'll get your fair share, and I won't fight you on it. But I can't stay in this house with you. I can't stay in a marriage built on lies. Melissa reached for him, but he stepped back, avoiding her touch. Daniel, don't do this. Please. I already have, he said quietly, walking toward the door. As he reached for his coat, he turned one last time, his voice steady. I hope you find whatever it is you were looking for. But it won't be with me. With that, Daniel stepped out into the cool night air. The house behind him, once a symbol of love and stability, now felt like a prison he was finally escaping. As he walked away, the weight on his shoulders began to lift, replaced by a bittersweet sense of freedom. This chapter was over. A new one awaited, and this time it would be on his terms.